obey him. The children, I don't know if they still do, but the children used to sing a song with Jesus in the boat. We can smile at the storm. I won't sing it, but I can do the actions. We can smile at the storm. Children's songs are great for learning Bible stories, aren't they? I'm not sure that is a great song. With Jesus in the boat, we can smile at the storm, is not really an accurate representation of the story that we just read. At no point do the disciples smile in this storm. And as in the storms of life we've seen in the past week, it's hard whether you're going through a personal storm at the moment, whether difficulties have come upon you in the past week, or whether you're just turning on your TV or the internet and are being almost bombarded by the news in the Ukraine, by the fear that is being spread, understandably, by seeing what is going on there and fear and anxiety and a storm coming upon you. It is difficult to smile, isn't it? Despite the fact that we know ultimately that God is on the throne and that Jesus is with us, that he has promised that he'll never leave us, that he'll never forsake us. But how do we smile as we see those things? We don't, do we? And it is only a children's story, and it is designed to teach this story. But as we've watched the events of the past week, and as we've looked and we've seen, yes, God is in control, and we've seen the different fighting, we've heard the different stories, and we've seen the fighting back, and we've seen the social media, and we've seen the Ukrainian president with everything that he's doing. And we say, yes, God is in control. And we can perhaps feel as perhaps even if we can smile. And then we hear threats, and we remember nuclear bombs. And then we see a nuclear plant on fire, and fear can grip us once again, can't it? So quickly and so easily. And once fear and anxiety gets us, it's very difficult for us to kind of get rid of it, as it were. And in stormy times, the question in a sense is, where is your faith? Is your faith in the politicians to try and sort this out? Is your faith in presidents? Is your faith in diplomacy and in diplomats? Is your faith in sanctions? Is your faith in scientists or ingenuity? Where is your faith? Because it will be somewhere. So let's have a look at this passage. I think it's a very helpful one for us in the midst of the storm in Europe, the storm perhaps that you're going through, perhaps nobody understands, nobody knows. Let's have a look at this. The first thing we see is the storm that raged. The storm that raged. It is evening time. Jesus, so it's going to be dark, of course. There's no lights. Don't have electricity. There's no floodlights. And they come across the boat. They're going to go across to the other side of the lake. And they leave the crowds behind. They get into a boat, and other boats travel along as well. Jesus is incredibly tired. They took him along just as he was. What does that mean, just as he was? Basically what they're doing, he is so tired, the disciples are kind of carrying Jesus into the boat. He's been teaching. The previous part of the previous chapter is all about Jesus preaching and teaching, in particular parables. And it's that day. It's the same day. He's exhausted from teaching. Preachers know what it's like on a Sunday evening and a Monday morning, how exhausting you can get. Jesus is far more tired because he's been preaching and teaching all day. And here he is. The disciples almost kind of carry him along onto the boat. They put him down in the stern and they provide a cushion for him. Have you ever wondered what a first century cushion looks like? I have no idea. Whether it's Sleep Easy or whatever, I've got no idea. But there's a cushion anyway for his head. And on the boat, Jesus falls asleep. He is exhausted. He is showing here his humanity. He's tired. It's the end of the day. It's been a busy day and tired he is. And so on he goes. Now, the boat, of course, is a fishing boat. It's a normal boat. It's not huge, but it's not a rowing boat either. It's just a normal Galilean first century fishing boat. Some of the disciples, of course, are fishermen, but some of them aren't. Some of them will have been better in the water. Some people are good on boats. Some of us are definitely not. Just the way it is, isn't it? Just the difference. Some of them will have great confidence in sailing, and some of them probably will be panicking and will be sucking on the travel sweets and all that kind of thing. There's 12 of them on there. The disciples are there. It's Jesus' followers. One of those, of course, being Peter, an eyewitness. He's on the boat. The one who has given Mark the details of Mark's gospel. And so this is Peter's record, really, of what is going on here as he gives it to Mark. Well, this area, this lake, is well known for sudden storms arising. It's not particularly unusual for a storm to rage. And this storm comes very violently and very suddenly. And the water is lapping into the boat. It's showing how big the waves are. The wind has whipped up the waves, and the waves are getting into the boat. A couple of weeks ago, we had that storm on the Friday, and lunch, first thing in the morning, even as the wind was just starting to get up, I was going into prison, and I saw the estuary. No waves on the estuary, but they were that day because of the wind. Big, quite waves. They looked like waves. That's what's happening here. The wind is whipping up the waves, and it's getting into the boat. The boat's in trouble. Water's getting in. I don't want to make you feel seasick, but the boat will be going up and down. And remember, in those days, people didn't swim. Swimming is quite a modern thing. They didn't swim in those days. None of the disciples would be able to swim. If the boat goes down, they're in real trouble. They're going to die. They are literally getting swamped, but they feel that they're getting overwhelmed as well. Death is seemingly inevitable. Teacher, don't you care if we drown, is how they approach Jesus. And so this storm rages upon them. And life can be like that, can't it? There are times in our lives when all of a sudden a storm will come. One moment everything is well. And then you get a phone call and everything changes. And then you get a doctor's diagnosis and everything changes. Then you get a disappointment and everything changes. Then your boss calls you into the office and everything changes. Some storms in life are kind of slow burners, aren't they? They build up. You kind of see them coming. You know there's something wrong. And it takes a while. But sometimes storms come very, very suddenly and they change everything. It's said, isn't it, a week is a long time in politics, but sometimes just a moment in our lives change everything. Even when people perhaps close to us have been ill for a long, long time, that finality at the end comes suddenly. And disappointment comes. Suddenly, on Friday, one of the greatest Australian cricketers, same age as me, brings it home, suddenly has a heart attack and dies. Everything changes. There was a documentary came out about his life just a couple of months ago, and I've been meaning to watch it, so I did watch it after his death. And there he talks about his life, and one of the things he says in his life is that he values loyalty. But he says, if someone's disloyal to me, I cut them off immediately. Why? They've disappointed him. Disappointment can come very suddenly, can't it? Storms can come very suddenly. That storm came for Shane Warne. And we can feel, can't we, overwhelmed in those times. And we can feel swamped in those times. And the storm that rages, it rages here, and is it demonic? he got up, rebuked the wind. The way that is worded, we'll see it in a moment, but as he says to the wind, quiet, be still. Is there some demonic presence behind the storm? It's a possibility. We don't know for certain, but it's a possibility. And storms like that come on you sometimes as a follower of Jesus Christ. Why? It's spiritual warfare. Sometimes storms come because you have an enemy. He is roaring like a lion. He is looking to deceive you. He is looking to devour you. He is looking to destroy your faith. And he comes. And there are times when it is demonic against you. And the storm comes. And Ephesians 6, we need to put into practice in those times. And it may be that the storm that you're experiencing is demonic, but it may not be, of course. It may be part of life. Illness is part of this sinful world, this sin-stricken world. Illness is all around us. Death is part of this life. It's part of this sinful world. And of course then some storms are there because of the way we live. Some storms are there because of the way that we act. Sometimes it's our fault, sometimes it's not, but occasionally it is. Sometimes it's just what happens under the plan of God. Because look what happens here. Where are they? Is this their fault? Well, they are on a boat, and they are crossing an area where it is known that storms can suddenly come. So they are in a place of potential danger. It's still God's plan, but they are the ones who decided to get on the boat. The other boats decided to follow Jesus, and this storm suddenly comes. And it's like that sometimes. It's not our fault, but it's part of life. We are where we are where God has put us, and here comes the storm. It's part of what God has planned for you. Well, we haven't gone out into a storm deliberately, but we're in the boat. We're in one of the boats. And it's an area where we could have a storm. It could be. That time of life, as we get older, it's likely that illness is going to come, isn't it? Storms in life come, and they can rage. Well, how do we deal with them? Well, the second thing we see is, we see the reaction of the disciples. The reaction of the disciples, part 1, anyway. So who are they? Well, of course, it's the 12 disciples. It's the 12 followers, the 12 learners of Jesus. That's what disciples mean. And as I mentioned earlier, some of them are fishermen, so some of them will have a little knowledge of how this storm is going to work. Are they the ones that are panicking the most? We don't know. Are they the ones that are panicking the least? We don't know. All we know is that the disciples as a group of people wake Jesus up. That's their reaction. And they are in, as we see from Jesus' answer, why are you so afraid? They are in full-on panic mode. Anxiety has completely overwhelmed them, and they are panicking on the boat. They really are. They are fearful for their lives. Their lives are at risk, remember? And they're overwhelmed. Remember, Jesus is with them, but they're still panicking. Jesus is there, visible to them, and yet they feel completely overwhelmed and as if death is at their door. What's the issue? The issue is this. Jesus might be with them. They know he's with them, but where's Jesus' attention? It's not on them, is it? We don't know where Jesus' attention is, whatever he's dreaming of, because Jesus is fast asleep. His attention is not on the disciples. The disciples know that. They know that he's there, but he's elsewhere. That's why they're in full-on panic mode. They've got to rouse him. They've got to wake him up. They've got to alert Jesus to the situation. They've got to bring the storm to Jesus. Jesus, look at this storm. Don't you care if we drown? Open your eyes, Jesus. Look. That's prayer, isn't it? That's real prayer. And remember when they go to wake him up, You can imagine him, can't you, shaking him. Remember, the storm is raging, the wind is blowing, there's going to be a lot of noise. Just of the noise of the sea, of the water would be enough, and the wind, that noise would be great. Jesus is sleeping through this. They're not going to whisper in his ear, Jesus, wake up. Some of us sleep lightly and the slightest noise can wake us up. That's not Jesus here. There's a huge storm raging and he doesn't wake up. They've got to alert him. They've got to wake him up. It would take a few calls, but wake him up. They do. That's the reaction of the disciples. It is panic and anxiety and real fear. But the reaction also is, go to Jesus. Wake him up. And they bring Jesus to the storm by bringing the storm to Jesus. And you and I need to do that, don't you, in the storms of life. They are bringing the storm to the attention of Jesus. Is that how you treat the storms of life? Is that how you deal with the problems that you've had in the past week, or today, or in life, or what you've seen on the TV? Do you bring them to the attention of Jesus? They knew that he was asleep. They knew his attention wasn't on them. You and I have no idea where the focus of Jesus is, do we? We don't know. We haven't got Jesus literally next to us. We don't know what his thoughts are. We know what he's promised us in his word. That's why we pray. That's why we bring these things to his attention. Lord, look at this situation. Isn't that what the psalmists do? That's what so many of the Psalms do. They bring situations to the attention of the living God. The psalmists so often say, Lord, don't you care? Don't you care, Lord? Look at the injustice. Look at this. The unjust are seemingly blessed, while the just are seemingly unblessed, if that's a word. But that's so many of the Psalms, isn't it? They cry out to God. Why are they profiting? Why aren't we? Why are they nations being lifted up and we aren't? Why is this going on? And the psalmists are bringing these things to the attention of God. We need to bring our storms and the storms that you and I experience to the living God. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? Lord God, are you seeing? That's what the psalmists say. Look. We do that. We are to do that. Lord, we know you care. Look at the situation in Ukraine. Look at the situation here. Look at what's going on in my life here. Lord, we know you care. Show, reveal your love, show your love, intervene. I mentioned earlier, people let Shane Warne down, the cricketer, and he said, one of the things I did, I ditch people as soon as they show any lack of loyalty. I put loyalty above everything else, he says. And as soon as they're disloyal to me, I ditch them. He says, that's a weakness of mine, he says. You know, Jesus doesn't do that with us, does he? We're disloyal to him so often, aren't we? But we are to be thankful that he is never disloyal to us. And he doesn't ditch us, despite us showing a lack of faith. Here, why are you so afraid? You still have no faith. But he doesn't say to them, go away, does he? He doesn't say to them, you're not going to be my disciples anymore. On the contrary. He doesn't cast them away. He does stick with them. Because that's what Jesus is like. We let him down, but he never lets us down, and he never ditches us either. Well, that's the reaction of the disciples, part one. Let's look at the reaction now, thirdly, of Jesus. The reaction of Jesus, he shows that he cares, doesn't he? He deals with the storm. Here their lives are in danger, and he deals with the storm. He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, quiet, be still. The wind died down, and it was completely calm. The phrase there, rebuked the wind and said to the waves, the original there is kind of unshackle. There's an unshackling. That's why, is it demonic or not? It could be. Kind of remove the shackles. That's the inference there. So it could be something demonic behind the storm. We just don't know. But it could be. It's a violent storm. in a place where violent storms come. But it's Jesus on the boat as well. But he rebukes the wind. Now, if you've experienced wind can get up very suddenly and wind can stop very suddenly, can't it? But if you've ever been on the sea, waves do not start and stop suddenly. Calm does not come, does it? We've all got, I'm sure you've got a story of sailing. I always remember telling a story, I think I told it here once years ago, of going across to Ireland for the rugby, and some of the flights were cancelled because it was so windy. And we were due to sail from Fishguard at, I think, 6:30 in the morning. We were all tired, and we fell asleep, and the boat is doing this when we woke up. And it's 9 o'clock, and we think, oh, great, we're halfway there. And we looked out, and we're still in port. And instead of taking 3 hours, it's kind of 4 or 5 hours. And I know it's gale force 8, and it was force 10. And I told this story years ago, and then somebody's always got a worse story. Oh, you were on the boat for 4 hours. Yeah, somebody we know, 24 hours. And they were trying to put down the anchor. And even the sailors thought they were going to die. There's always worse stories, aren't there? But this is a real storm. And we can be like that with other people. Sometimes we're too quick, aren't we? Somebody comes and they mentions, I've got a problem. Oh, yeah, I had that problem. Well, is that helpful? Is it helpful to know somebody's got a worse storm story? You know, I like my storm story. But we see the power here of Jesus, don't we? He speaks. He doesn't pray, he speaks. You and I would pray. You and I would ask God. He doesn't speak to his Father. Jesus directly speaks to the storm, to nature itself, and nature itself, this creation, listens. And he brings calm in the midst of this storm by speaking a few words. Disciples are still in the boat. They're still with him. They're still in the water, but the storm is gone. Years ago, the story of King Canute is, we think, a true one, though we often get the wrong end of the stick. King Canute famously, I think on his throne, was taken to the seashore and commanded the waves to stop coming in or to start going out, whichever it was. And of course the waves don't obey the king. And actually, allegedly, the true story is, if it did occur at all, because historians are now doubting whether it occurred at all, but there you go. But the story is that King Canute actually was trying to show that he wasn't divine. People thought in those days that kings were divine, not just divine appointments, but divine themselves. And so King Canute apparently went out to show that he wasn't God, that he wasn't divine, that he couldn't command the sea and the waves as they came in. Well, Jesus here is showing that he very much is divine. He is doing what only God can do, and he is doing it. It's him. It's his voice. It's his authority. It is his power as he speaks to the storm, as he speaks to nature itself, and nature itself listens to what Jesus says and acts and is obedient to the voice of Jesus. And the storm disappears. That is the difference that Jesus makes. There is Jesus' reaction. It shows that he cares. It shows that he does something. But look at the questions he asks the disciples. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Now, why no faith? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being scared if you're on a boat, is there? And, you know, the boat is going up and down and everything else. Why would you not be afraid? That's the right reaction. Why are they so afraid of dying? And, you know, it could be that you're on a boat and you think, well, gosh, my time is up. Do you still have no faith? Now, why? Well, the key is what Jesus says right in the beginning in verse 35. Let us go over to the other side. Jesus doesn't say, let's go on a boat ride. He doesn't say, let's go into a storm. He doesn't say, let's test your faith. He doesn't say any of those things. Jesus says, let's go to the other side. Jesus has promised them, basically, you're going to get to the other side. That's where we're going. So what the disciples should have done when the storm and the water's coming in, they should have woken him up and said, Jesus, look, you said we're going to get to the other side safely, clearly, but the boat actually is in a bit of trouble and there's water coming in. Lord, we don't know how you're going to get us there, but we know that you're going to get us to the other side. We think we should do something at this point. That's faith. But they don't just demonstrate it, do they? They don't display it. I've promised to take you to the other side safely. Where's their faith as they panic? Well, where is their faith? It's gone, isn't it? Their eyes are on the storm and the power of the storm and the effect of the storm, and not on the Lord Jesus. Jesus calms the storm. They don't display any faith, and yet Jesus still saves them. It's not their faith that saves them, is it? It is Jesus. It is the promise of Jesus that saves them and his power. And of course, they're not the only boats on the lake. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. They haven't got Jesus in their boat, but they are still saved from the storm by Jesus. They are. They may be further away, but they're under the power of Jesus. Well, the fourth thing we see here is the reaction of the disciples, part 2. The reaction of the disciples, part 2. This whole story is about fear, anxiety, and kind of panic. It really is. Because how now do they react to what Jesus does? The one that they've been with for quite a while, the one that they've heard preaching and teaching, the one that they've seen produce miracles, when they see this miracle, verse 41, they were no longer terrified, and now they had complete calm and faith. No, they were terrified and asked each other, who is this? Well, they know who he is. He's Jesus of Nazareth. He's Mary's son. They know who Jesus is. But who is it? Who is it really? What's his identity? Who really is this man? Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey Jesus. Not listen, obey Jesus. Nature is obeying Jesus. They are seeing, when they don't see it here, they don't get it at all, do they, at this point? They don't see that the one who is God, who has put on flesh, God who has come into this world as a human being, they don't see that he's God. They don't see his divine nature, even though he is demonstrating in front of their very eyes by what he says, divinity. He is showing them, revealing who he is. But they still don't get it. And they are terrified. They are terrified of him and his power, what he can do. Who is this? The wind and the waves obey him. They're frightened of him. It's fear has gripped them again. You see, fear, anxiety, doesn't move in this chapter. It's still there. But it's got now a different object. Instead of being frightened of the storm and of death, they've now got a fear of Jesus. A healthy fear, but a fear nevertheless. Who's this? Who is this? They are asking. And it stays with them. They've displayed a lack of faith in what Jesus has said, and now they're fearful of Jesus' power. And the attention of this fear switches, and anxiety. And life can be like that, can't it? Our anxieties can change from day to day. We start off being anxious about one thing, and then we switch our anxieties to something else. First of all, it's kind of Putin and his finger on the button. Well, there are others who've got the keys as well, so it's not just him, is it? And then we're frightened because a nuclear plant is on fire. Our attention changes, doesn't it? Question is, of course, where's your attention? Are you looking at the storms in your life? or in the one who can calm the storm. Stephen the martyr, the first martyr, as he is being stoned to death. He knows he's going to die. He's being executed. He's being killed. He's being murdered. Look at what he's looking at. He sees heaven opened before him. He sees the Lord, doesn't he? That's where his attention is. In the midst of the storm of life, death, he sees Jesus, not the storm. So where's your attention? Because what real, ultimate difference does Jesus make here in the story? Ultimately, he changes the destination of the disciples. They were heading for death, and by doing what Jesus does, Jesus takes them safely across the other side. They have life instead of death. And that's the difference that Jesus makes. And this morning, what is your destination? Are you trusting Jesus ultimately to take you safely across to the other side? It is only Jesus who could calm this storm and save the disciples. It is only Jesus who can bring you through the ultimate storm that life brings and take you safely to the other side. Jesus himself tells a story about that. Two men building a house. It's their life. One of them builds it. It looks great. The other man builds his house. That looks great too. Nothing different really looking on the outside. But one of them has built their house upon sand, and one of them has built their house upon a foundation of rock. And the storm comes and destroys both houses. But one of them has gone because it's built on sand, while one of them still stands, even in that destructive storm, because it's built upon a rock. Storm, where is your sting? The disciples could answer in the end. It's been defeated by Jesus. Death, where is your sting? It's been defeated by Jesus. And so where are you building your life? Where are you? As you go through the storms of life, are you looking to Jesus? Have you got his promise to take you safely through to the other side? Or are you trusting in somewhere, anywhere else? There is nowhere else that the disciples could have been saved. No one else could have helped them. And no one else ultimately can help you or me either. It is only Jesus who takes us safely through to the other side. Death, where is your sting? It is defeated by Jesus Christ. Well, we're going to sing.